Hello and welcome to Wood's RPG Review, where I give my thoughts on role-playing games, card games and board games. Today's retro review is 1985's Trail of the Loathsome Slime for Call of Cthulhu 2nd edition by Games Workshop. Okay, first a bit of history. Trail of the Loathsome Slime is a 16-page softback adventure which was, unusually at the time, set in the then present day. To understand it more, we look to the inside. It says, this adventure was originally developed as part of a modern-day Call of Cthulhu campaign in the UK from 1983 to 1985. A short synopsis with many details altered or omitted appeared in the article Cthulhu Now, White Dwarf Magazine issue 43, July 1983. Some of the material in this adventure modifies information originally presented in the first part of that article, White Dwarf 42, June 1983, where there are changes. This volume should be taken as a definitive source. So here we have it. The adventure was basically too big for White Dwarf at the time, so they decided to publish it as a larger scenario, and importantly, it looks like it was a precursor to Cthulhu Now. Okay, to the cover. Here we have an okay piece by Brian Williams of one of the encounters that takes place in the scenario. Right, to the inside. First thing we are greeted with are a list of new skills that help players deal with modern day problems such as computer use, electronics, and perhaps most importantly, nuclear physics. We then have a brief intro to the scenario that has the player with the highest occult skill receiving a telephone call from Russell Corey, an American acquaintance and renowned clairvoyant. Corey seems guarded in his speech and invites the investigator to his apartment to show them something that will, as he says, blow their minds. When they arrive at the apartment, as I imagine you already expect, ambulance men are loading the body of Corey into the back of their vehicle. We then have a brief synopsis of the scenario. It concerns the British Bird Preservation Society, or BPPS, and an expedition to an island south of the Falklands called Griffin Island on a ship called the Delta Pioneer that has vanished along with her 10 crew. It is estimated that the crew arrived at the island during severe weather and the outbreak of the Anglo-Argentinian conflict or the Falklands War. The ship is suspected to either have been sunk by storms or the enemy. Shortly after this loss, Corey started having dreams about the ship where he was on it sailing to the island while the crew were murdering each other. Recently, Corey bought a diary of Ernest St. Vincent Hamilton, a Dagon worshipper and cultist who was executed in 1927 for the crime of human sacrifice. The diary was encrypted, but Corey has used a computer to crack the code and translated the contents. He had discovered that Hamilton had buried a sealed chest on an island south of the Americas, hinting at their location and that they contained something important. Corey realised while reading the diary that it was Griffin Island. One of the cultists who survived, an Arthur Hoskins, had stayed on board the ship while the chest was being hidden. After the cult was destroyed, he went aground and decided later on to return to the island to try and find the chest, joining scientific missions there because he lacked the funds to do it himself, which later led to more scientific interest in the island. Hoskins died in 1965, having never found the chest, passing the mission on to his grandson, Arnold Rothman, who, being more interested in money than crazy cults, has decided to find the treasure, serving on the Delta Pioneer twice as a sailor, looking for the cave. He was in hospital when the Delta Pioneer went missing, but has joined the next mission, that of the Epsilon Pioneer, as a second mate. He saw the newspaper article covering the purchase of the diary and has realised that the diary covered the original time of the treasure being buried there, so decided to break into Corey's house to steal it. Unfortunately, he was disturbed by Corey and in the ensuing fight stabbed Corey, stealing the diary and fleeing. He intends to find out from the diary where the treasure is. Unfortunately for him, he has larger problems on his hands. The recent storms have damaged a cliff face that was holding 2 shoggoths that were trapped there. They've left their cave and killed most of the population of the island's birds, as well as sinking the Delta Pioneer that had actually reached there in safety. The other issue is that Corey's dreams were not of the past, but the future. The visions he had of everybody killing each other is the result of some ergot-tainted food that the crew eat that causes temporary and violent insanity. The first thing the players need to do is to investigate Corey's flat. It's a stealthy affair that results in them finding the code-breaking program on some floppy disks. They can recover a printout of the diary, which gives the players a few handouts that contain pertinent information. The players can also use the library for information, not only relating to Hamilton but also to Corey. They can find the court transcript from Hamilton's trial and a study by the BBPS detailing the revival of the penguin population on Griffin Island that also gives details of the Delta Pioneer as well as a diagram of the Epsilon Pioneer. Through the newspaper clippings relating to the Epsilon Pioneer, they can learn of Corey's interest in it, and the general accepted course here is that they should endeavour to join the expedition. This is a fairly difficult affair, but the adventure details methods, some of skullduggery, that allow them to be on it when it sets sail. The voyage is generally uneventful until they reach Port Stanley, where they take on food and supplies. Unknown to anybody, the bed is infected with hallucinogenic ergot fungus. We then have the fairly deadly rules for ergot, and a timeline of when the crew gets infected and start attacking each other. This series of events culminates in the players arriving at Griffin Island and being run aground. The players find the island not quite as they may have expected. Firstly, they notice how quiet it is. Rothman, who is on the voyage, mentions that it should be incredibly noisy due to the 5 million or so penguins that live there. However, only a few dozen are visible, and the island is covered in broad bands of glistening slime that smells of decaying seaweed and has thousands of what look like tiny bone fragments in it. A bit of scientific investigation will show that they are penguin bones. Everything of any value on the island has been completely destroyed. The penguin population has been reduced to a mere 1,000 birds, which will eventually drive this particular species to extinction. Following this, we have player handouts again, followed by a topographic map of the island which shows the bird hides in the former hut where scientists would stay while they were here. We then have a map of the Epsilon Pioneer and some plans of the island cave where the cult treasure is stored. Eventually, through exploration, the players should find the cave and its treasure, a chest that contains 2 sheathed silver swords, enchanted so that they can strike as magical weapons, and can also be used to make a Vorish sign. They also find a leather-bound book that contains spells pertaining to Father Dagon and Mother Hydra. During the daytime, the Shoggoths hide. At night, however, all hell breaks loose as they both attack the crew and ship. We're given a raft of options for the players, so they can either escape or otherwise defeat the Shoggoths, and will also have to deal with Rothman who can lead them to the cave. Following this are notes on the aftermath of the scenario. We then have a list of NPCs who are mostly replete with decent character art, although these 3 seem to be a sketch of the same person from different angles. Additionally, there are some notes on how to set it in the 1920s, and a fairly basic map of the route of the Epsilon Pioneer. Generally, there's nothing to really dislike about Trail of the Loathsome Slime. The layout is a bit strange, and the printing of the handouts twice seems like a cheap way to fill space, but the artwork is decent throughout, and it's fairly well put together, and has all the charm of early Games Workshop products. But something this short should never really have made it to print. Also, the ergot outbreak seems a bit, dare I say it, unbelievable. It does feel like a scenario from White Dwarf, and as such, it's probably only viable for a few sessions at best, as material-wise there's not really a lot to go with. And with the frankly ridiculous prices it is going for on eBay, your money could be better spent on other, more substantial and fulfilling campaigns. It is worth pointing out something important here though. This adventure is clearly a precursor to Cthulhu Now being conceived, without which we may not have the likes of Delta Green, which makes it a small but very significant contribution to the current crop of modern horror-based material. And for that, it is of some value to those who collect Call of Cthulhu material. I give Trail of the Loathsome Slime a 6 out of 10. If you enjoyed this review, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also, don't forget to check out my other reviews. Bud out.